Before beginning, gather all your tools and supplies. You'll need a mixing bowl, a measuring cup, spatula, a little measuring scoop, tray or pan, as well as a bottle of vegetable glycerin, and either gelatin or agar. Begin by measuring out a cup and a half of glycerin. When I pour the glycerin into my measuring cup, I pour it down the side so that I'm avoiding adding any unnecessary air bubbles. Now as I pour it in the bowl, I do the same thing. I try to hit the side of the bowl first and pour it in slowly, avoiding creating air bubbles. Next, measure out 1 cup of powdered gelatin or agar. Start sprinkling it into the gelatin very slowly and stir as you go. So don't dump it all in at once, you'll get one big clump. So I sprinkle a little in at a time. I stir slowly to allow the gelatin or agar to absorb some of the moisture from the glycerin as I go. And then I just sprinkle in, pour in a little bit more at a time. Once all of the gelatin or agar is mixed with the glycerin, I continue mixing and combining it slowly for between 2 and 5 minutes. You'll see how I'm sort of scooping it and flipping it over a little here. That's just to make sure it's all well combined and the moisture is dispensing into the powder. You may get some clumps, and if you do, that's okay. You can just eliminate them by pressing them up against the side of the bowl and continuing to stir very slowly. This should be a very thick mixture at this point. After 2 to 5 minutes of mixing, let it rest and let the gelatin begin blooming. You'll need to let it rest for about 15 minutes. Check the mixture now and continue to squash any remaining clumps that you find. There shouldn't be too many at this point, but it's good to do a quick check. Sometimes I also find there's a lot of foam. These bubbles sort of combine and stick together, and I'll scoop those out while I can at this point and just kind of dump them out on a paper towel. At this point now we are ready to add hot water, so make sure your water is boiling and pour a cup and a half into your measuring cup. And now boiling water has bubbles, so we have to go super slowly here. I pour it down the side of the bowl to avoid adding any unnecessary bubbles to the mixture at this point. Again, we're going to mix very slowly until integrated, and you'll see the water mix with the other ingredients. This is my real pace. I am not slowing this down. This is true to life at this point. And I stirred like this for about 5-6 minutes. Now to speed things up for you a little bit, here's a time lapse, just so you can see how it transitions. At first you'll notice that the glycerin and the gelatin or agar clumpy mixture is at the bottom and the water is at the top, and they're very separated, and gradually through this 5 to 6 minutes of slow stirring, you'll see those begin to combine more and more and fully integrate more and more. Once everything is fully integrated and mixed completely, head over to your microwave. At the microwave, I'm going to put this bowl in here and turn it on for 30 seconds. This is on high. My microwave has a button that automatically is just a quick start, 30 seconds on high. but make sure you're on high for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, take it out, and again you're going to stir very slowly for another 30 seconds. You're going to repeat these steps 4 times. Heat for 30, stir for 30, heat for 30, stir for 30, heat for 30, stir for 30, for a total of 4 times. Every time you stir, you should be going very slowly to make sure you do not add any extra air bubbles, but making sure it is fully integrated and mixed and there are no clumps. Once it's fully mixed, after those 4 times back and forth in the microwave, we're going to pour this very low and very slowly into our tray or pan. Again, this is all to avoid adding any extra air bubbles. So I have the bowl very close to the tray as I'm pouring it, and I'm super slow while I'm doing it. Just as a tip, don't throw this right in the sink. I let it cool, and I'll actually usually put it in the fridge. When it's really cold, it's much easier to remove all that goop and clean it out. So next, I'm going to skim the bubbles from the surface of this tray with a piece of newspaper or thin paper. So I have paper that is the width of the tray, and I'm slowly scraping it across the top couple of millimeters of my liquid. When I get to the edge of the tray, I use that paper to sort of drag it up the side and scoop things out. I want to get rid of as many air bubbles as I can because those bubbles will show up in your prints if you leave them in there and they're on a surface that you're going to use. Okay, now it's time to let this sit. So I leave it on the counter, don't move it at all for 2 hours. Then throw it in the refrigerator for at least another 4 hours. Sometimes I just leave it overnight because it's easier. Here's a smaller one I made from scraps, and I just wanted to show you quickly how to remove it. I use a knife or an X-Acto, and I release the sides, and as I'm doing that, I'm pulling with my opposite hand to kind of get some air in there and get the gelatin to pull away from the glass in this case. This is another reason I prefer to use glass. This way I don't scrape or scratch the sides of a metal pan or tray. Sometimes I need another tool, spatula, butter knife, something like that to get up under there. And then you want to remove this super duper slowly from your pan or tray. You don't want to bend it, break it, make a cut in it in any way. So just go really slow, nice and gentle. You spent this long making it, and you should have this beautiful, clear, wobbly gelatin plate for monotype printing. The easiest way, as I said, to clean these trays is when they're cold. So I throw them in the fridge first, and now I can take my gelatin plate and trim it to different sizes that I need, and I will have scraps after doing that. So I cut off the edges because my trays sort of curved near the edges, so I get rid of those. And then what I do is I just tear them or cut them with scissors into little cubes to make it easier. And I will throw all of these cubes into my glass measuring cup. There we go. Magic of video, folks. There they are. And that's quite a lot of gelatin, so I don't want to throw that out. So I'm going to do the same thing. Microwave for 30, stir for 30, a couple of times. That's the first one. You can see that there's still some solid forms in there, so I'm going to throw that back in again. Heat for another 30 seconds, and then I'll come back and stir for another 30 seconds. Here we go. Magic of video. There's some light so you can see. And I do have some air bubbles in here and some clumps in here. If you have clumps or like a chunk of bubbles, you can squash them up against the side of the glass and drag them out. But make sure everything is fully mixed and you don't have any other solids in there. And then once again, now I have a smaller tray this time. And I just pour low and slow, using the side of the tray whenever possible to avoid adding any extra air bubbles. Same thing now. I have a shorter piece of paper I'm tearing here, and I'm going to skim the surface, the top few millimeters, with that thin paper to drag any of those bubbles out of there. And then set. Counter for 2 hours, fridge for at least 4, and you're good to go.